Succession literally means the order of one thing following another one or following something else is a type of succession as well. In ecology, it is what happens when you start off with a new environment. We will talk about terrestrial succession now, and we're going to do aquatic environments later this week, so we'll talk about aquatic succession then. And it is, in its primary form, it's very rare. You need some very specific conditions, such as lava flows or landslides. That'll work. I mean, with mudslides, same thing, same idea. But basically, whatever exposes bare rock. Okay, so you got rock, and it's flat enough that it'll hold what? What's the other ingredient that you have to have for life always?
Water.
Water, yeah. So it's flat enough that the water can pool up on it, sit there for a little bit. You have the potential for life to form and start on that. Okay, and so not a whole lot of things can handle such bare conditions, but lichens can. Lichens are one of lichens and mosses are typical organisms that can do that kind of thing, called pioneer organisms. And one of the reasons why lichens are able to do this is that they are actually two organisms. They're a mutualistic organism, very similar to the coral that has the algae inside of it. Lichens are a fungus that has an algae inside of it. Okay, as a matter of fact, you'll see there are a variety of colors, and that once again is from the algae cells that live inside the fungus cells. So that's good because you have a producer and something to break down the waste products of that producer so it can get its nutrients again. So you have a little ecosystem of its own just within that organism. But they need places to stay, and they need a place for water to collect. They, of course, also need that water. So they'll move in, they'll sit there for a little while. As they're there, they will, for one thing, they'll physically, with little projections, they're not really roots, but they'll push little parts of them down into the rock to hold themselves in place. That, of course, breaks that rock up. They will also decompose, and that will secrete acids, which will dissolve the rocks up. So you're going to end up having that rock that they're on become little smaller bits of rock, kind of like sand. And then you have the decomposing pieces of lichen, as well as anything that comes along to eat that lichen that may leave its waste product there, bugs or birds or something like that, or might actually die there and contribute to the organic content there. So you've got bits of rock, sand, and you've got organic content. Those two things together make what?
Life.
Well, they help to contribute to life, but
Soil.
soil is correct. Very good. So what we see for how a typical ecological succession progresses, it's mainly based around the buildup of soil. This is in terrestrial ecosystems. Okay, so you've got the lichens there. They got some bugs that come along and eat it. They die. The lichens die. The new ones grow up, but they leave the old decaying matter in their place. They break up the rock that they're on, etc. That provides some mineral content. Eventually, the soil gets thick enough that it can support grasses. The grasses attract other consumers, birds, etc. They come in, they once again leave their waste products, the soil builds up more, small bushes and shrubs can come in, and it will continue to go through that process as the soil builds up with larger and larger plants all the way up to hardwood trees. If, of course, the physical conditions allow for that. If there's enough water in that area, it's the main thing, and it doesn't have permafrost to support trees, then eventually you should end up with in a place where you have a fully developed forest. That soil formation, by the way, is called petagenesis. It's a little key term out there. So that final stage is known as a climax community. But I want to stress to you here that not all areas are going to become climax communities. Otherwise, the whole Earth, of course, will be covered with forests. So at what point an ecosystem has reached its climax stage is dependent upon the environmental conditions there, primarily the climate conditions. So deserts are actually climax communities because in that area, that's as far as it's going to go. Okay? So we tend to associate that with forests, but it doesn't have to be that way. Type of the organism that exists there is in this environment depends upon, in this, biome is what we're looking for there. I'll accept environment. That depends upon the climate, primarily, as we have seen. And not only may it not reach a forested climax community stage, like a desert or grassland, but it also might become a fully evolved community, become a climax community, a forest, and something could happen to it. As a matter of fact, this occasional clearing of big parts of the forest through fires and foundational species, floods sometimes do that as well, is necessary. It's important for it. Because what happens when these forests get all the way grown up and maxed out, so to speak, is the trees lock up all the nutrients and they inhibit sunlight from getting to the forest floor. So you end up with a mature forest and you got most of your biomasses in the trees. Now they can support a pretty wide variety of life, but it's still not the most biodiverse state for that to be in. So what is actually an ecological necessity and promotes biodiversity and productivity is that occasionally these things will have fires, they'll have foundational species like elephants or termites or something like that, or beavers come through, and or humans, of course. Now we tend to do it to the excess, so we don't like to put that in a good light. But when it's done in small amounts, and particularly with the older trees that live in the forest, they're going to be more susceptible also to these different things as well, because their wood is not as dense anymore. It makes way for a new generation, so to speak, and you have this stage where it goes through all that whole successional process again, which means more species, more biodiversity, better for the ecosystem. Okay. Biomes are your climax communities around the world for that climate. And it says worldwide distribution, as I mentioned the other day. In order to be considered a biome, it has to exist on at least 2 continents. Okay, the main thing that we identify biomes with are their producers, and those producers tend to, of course, be adapted to the climate.
What is the last one say?
Mountains.
So what does this say, Group 7?
MTS mountains.
Mountains.
That mountains, Group 7?
MTS.
Oh,
Shouldn't there be an N?
That is correct. As an answer, we will go ahead and spell it out. So of course it gets colder as you go up a mountain, and therefore you have the potential, particularly if it's a tropical mountain like Mount Kilimanjaro or one of the Andes, to go through several biomes as you go up that mountain. You would start, if you're in a tropical area, you would start at the bottom with a rainforest, and then go through a deciduous forest, and then a coniferous forest, a taiga type forest, and then you may have a grassland and a tundra before you get up to the top where it might be cold enough if it's a tall mountain to have a ice sheet and an ice field and everything there. So that would pretty much cover all your different biomes in one particular area. And then another effect that mountains have is called the rain shadow. Any idea what that is? Rain shadow, rain shadow. Rain shadow. Mountains do this. Rain shadow. Right, that's where the mountain range blocks the water. So if you've got a mountain range like the Himalayas or like the Sierra Nevadas,
on the other side.
yeah, you'll have one side where the water comes up. It's going to be nice, lush forested areas in that area. But on the other side, you'll have a desert because the clouds cannot make it across the mountains, and therefore it's much drier. So you'll have grasslands and deserts and stuff on that. This is true of the Mojave Desert we have here in the United States. That's primarily, well, it's on the 30-degree parallel, but it also is affected by the Sierra Nevadas that block the rain coming in that way. And of course, the Gobi Desert in China is on the north side of the Himalayan mountains. And of course, there's not any clouds are going to make it across that, or very few. Okay. Questions? Anybody about succession? Yeah, Jimmy.
I feel like I've already been explained this, but what causes the temperature to change as you get higher up?
The air density is lower as you get higher up. And what causes the temperature change is because the air density